The Great War was fought between 1914 and 1918 and mobilised 70 million people for its cause. It was a war where people lost their individuality and became part of vast quantities of numbers that either perished or were never the same again. Amongst these numbers were individuals, some of whom had experienced that which went beyond the horrors of war and into the supernatural. In 1916, the Daily Express reported on a British colonel who was highly regarded amongst his men who fought in Flanders. One morning in the course of fighting, a hand grenade deprived him of an arm. He was taken back to England to be treated for his injuries, but wanted nothing more than to be returned to the front to be with his men. However, this was not to be. Command told him that he could not return to the Western Front. Thus, he was given command of a garrison battalion in the Mediterranean. Even so, his men back in Flanders never lost hope that they would see their colonel again, even after they found out about his reassignment. And yet, when the colonel arrived in Lemnos, upon landing he was one of the first to be afflicted with dysentery. A Red Cross ship took him back to England, and he was able to arrive at one of the Channel ports safely. Yet, on the train taking him to London, his affliction worsened, and he passed away. It is said that as the colonel lay dying on the train to London, his men in their trench in Flanders reported an extraordinary event. The men were going about their business when the company's sergeant major is said to have reported to the commander, "Here's the colonel coming round. I didn't know he was back again." Supposedly, the commanding officer then looked up and saw the colonel. His appearance is described in detail in the article of 1916. He was standing with his cap just a little to one side, as he always wore it. His field boots were caked with mud, and an old pair of binoculars were slung around his neck. As the officer approached the colonel to greet him, he dropped his stick, and so bent down to pick it up. When he looked up at the colonel, he was gone. There was no explaining it. Unaware that the colonel was dying, none of the men who saw him that day thought that they had seen a ghost. They had seen their colonel, full-bodied and alive. Immediately after the incident, the officer rushed down a communication trench and queried the officers there. "Did you see him?" he is said to have asked. One of the officers is reported as having explained that they all saw the colonel looking down the trench, clearly seeing him for a full minute, before all of a sudden he was not there anymore. They further attested to this apparition by stating that all the men saw him too, and yet there was a peculiarity. The colonel had both his arms. It was not until the following week, when the mail arrived, that the regiment learned of the colonel's death. The article goes on to claim that over 100 soldiers claimed to have seen the apparition of their beloved colonel come before them to say goodbye to them one last time.